Welcome, everybody, to another Village Torah portion discussion with me, your host, Rabbi Drew. This week's Torah portion is Vayera, the fourth parasha, the fourth Torah portion in the book of Genesis. And like a lot of the book of Genesis, it has a lot of stories, many of which we're familiar with. One of them includes the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, of which we read on Rosh Hashanah, and where we get the shofar. We also get many other things. The last couple of years in this space, we have discussed the weaning of Isaac, sort of as he and the party that is thrown for him. We also contrasted Abraham's hospitality, which appears at the beginning of this week's Torah portion, and that of his nephew Lot and his hospitality, because they had the same visitors come and visit them. That also leads us into what I want to talk about, which is not just the hospitality, but Sedom. So that's where Lot is living, in Sedom. They have these two cities, Sedom and Amorah. They really come in, of course, we see with the story of Lot, and he welcomes, he's hospitable to the visitors, but the townsfolk are not so nice. They are not so hospitable. And we also see, I can't help but think when we read this week's Torah portion about, I think about a movie or a television show where the camera focuses on a particular character or two, or what's going on in one place, and then it shifts to talk about a character or something else going on in another place, and sometimes even a third place, and it'll sort of, the camera's focus will shift from different plot lines. And that is what's going on in this week's Torah portion. It begins with the visitors to Abraham. We also later see the camera sort of shifting, if you will, if we want to continue using the storytelling sort of devices. The camera sort of reflects to Abraham and God's conversations, but also Lot and what's going on there. So the camera continues shifting around. We see that Abraham is informed by God. God tells him, look, these 5 towns, in Sedom, Amorah, and a few other places, I'm going to wipe them all out. I'm going to destroy them. I'm going to utterly destroy them, and they're going to be gone. Abraham is disturbed by this. He protests. He says, God, don't do this. God says, stuff isn't good with them. They're not behaving well. Abraham says, I'll bargain with you, God. How about 50 people? There are 5 towns, 10 people in each place. They've got to have at least 10 people in each place that are good folk. Turns out there isn't. So he says, okay, what about a little less? Still not. What about a little less or a little fewer? Still no. And he keeps going and going and going. Ultimately, what about, Abraham says to God, what about 10? 10 total. So 2 in each town. What about that? That'll save all 5 from destruction. God agrees. God says, sure. Abraham, you know what? You got a deal. I'm on board with that deal. Let's cut this deal. Because Abraham doesn't know, turns out God does. They don't even have 10 across all 5 towns. So God lays waste to these places. Now, and then that ultimately results in the departure and the fleeing of Lot and his family from Sedom. Now, the question that arises is, what was so bad about Sedom? Now, it turns out we only really know what's in the Torah portion, what's in the Torah. We're going to both read what's in the Torah, as well as seeing and glimpsing at rabbinic attitudes, much later, right? Thousands of years later, what the rabbis perceived as being problematic about the behavior of the people of Sedom. So that's what we're going to go look at right now. Fortunately, someone else has prepared these sources for us, as we're going to now explore them. What was their sin? So the Lord said, this outrage of Sedom and Amorah. Actually, that's a whole other separate thing. I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure the linguists out there can trace exactly the development or what happened. That if you are to read the Hebrew, it says Sedom va'Amorah. So you have Sedom, that's one town. The other is Amorah. There's a whole other question. I don't know the history of how. Okay, so Sedom is translated as Sedom, or transliterated as Sedom. But how did Amorah become Gomorrah? I don't know how that happened. There's probably someone out there who can share that with us. So Sedom and Amorah, even though in English we typically call them Sedom and Gomorrah, the outrage of Sedom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grave. I will go down to see whether they have acted altogether according to the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will take note. So that's part of. So God is disturbed by the behavior of the people in those towns. Then we see at the beginning of chapter 19, the two angels arrived in Sedom in the evening as Lot was sitting at the gate of Sedom. When Lot saw them, he rose to greet them, and bowing low with his face to the ground, he says, "Please, my lords, turn aside to your servant's house to spend the night and bathe your feet. Then you may be on your way early." But they said, "No, we will spend the night in the square." But he urged them strongly. So they turned his way and entered his house. He prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. They had not yet lain down when the townspeople, the men of Sedom, young and old, all the people to the last man, gathered about the house. And they shouted to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may intimate with them." So Lot, clearly wanting to be a good host, a protective host, went out to them to the entrance, shut the door behind him, and said, "I beg you, my friends, do not commit to such a wrong. Look, I have two daughters who have..." Oh, he's now talking to the townsfolk. "I beg you, my friends, do not commit such a wrong. Look, I have two daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you please, but do not do anything to these men, since they have come under the shelter of my roof." So now he is being protective. He wants to protect the guests. He barely knows them. He wants to protect them. He's willing to offer up his daughters. But they said, "Stand back." The fellow came here as an alien, and already he acts the ruler. Now they're upset with Lot because apparently they have different sense of morality. Lot has a different sense of morality. Clearly, they want to have their way with these visitors. Lot says, "This is not okay." Okay, so Lot came here as an alien, and already he acts the ruler. Now we will deal worse with you than with your guests. And they pressed hard against the person of Lot and moved forward to break the door. But the men stretched out their hands, clearly the visitors to Lot, and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And the people who were at the entrance of the house, young and old, they were struck with blinding light so that they were helpless to find the entrance, which kind of answers our question of how, if they were so close, so many men also pushing on the door, how would they not be able to eventually force down the door? I guess you have this blinding light that makes them sort of get lost in the light. Okay. Later on, we have much later. So that's the Torah that's within our week's Torah portion. Much later, we see in the book of Ezekiel, "Only this was the sin of your sister Sedom, arrogance. She and her daughters had plenty of bread and untroubled tranquility, yet she did not support the poor nor the needy. In their haughtiness, they committed abomination before me, and so I removed them, as you saw." So now Ezekiel, or at least what's written here in the book of Ezekiel, is positioning, yes, from what we read in this week's Torah portion, it seems that it was a desire to commit sexual transgression against these guests. Ezekiel positions it differently, as this plenty of bread, untroubled tranquility, but not supporting the poor nor supporting the needy, and apparently being haughty. So it's a little bit of a different perspective, from the prophets here, from Ezekiel. So we have, it's not just about this weird inhospitability, but also now this new angle of not being kind to the poor nor to the needy. Now moving on to the rabbis. Now what we see is Pirkei Avot in the 5th chapter. I've spoken previously about Pirkei Avot, but this is a nice piece from Pirkei Avot that directly mentions Sedom. There are 4 types of character in human beings. One that says, "Mine is mine and yours is yours." This is a commonplace type. Mida benoni. It's sort of an average typical approach to possessions between amongst people. And some say Zomirat Sedom. Some say no. This is a sodomite characteristic. This is what stone people would say. It's a pretty extreme statement. Okay, one that says mine is yours and yours is mine is an unlearned person. That's foolish, just to swap everybody's property. One that says mine is yours is a pious person. One that says mine is mine and yours is mine is a wicked person. So the stone aspect here is to simply to say that, well, what everybody has, that's it. And it doesn't really, I like of course, the very first approach. That's commonplace. That's normal people. But the stone piece of it is really interesting because it kind of connects with what we saw with Ezekiel. Yeah, just because everybody has what they have, that's nice. But if you were to say, let's be charitable to poor, let's be charitable to those maybe not so fortunate, maybe we should also give. So that's an interesting wrinkle here in Pirkei Avot. So we have some rabbinic stuff in the Babylonian Talmud here. So just wanted to go through some of these interesting texts and see what we can glean from them. It is reported that a certain person bought land along the boundary of his father's property. After some time, the father died. When they came to divide the estate, this person said to his brothers, "Give me my portion of the estate along my boundary." Rabbah, so he is a late 3rd century, early 4th century rabbi. Rabbah said, in a case such as this, the court compels people to refrain from conduct characteristic of, you guessed it, stone. So the commentary fills us in. The court forces a person to waive his legal rights in order to prevent him from acting in a manner characteristic of the wicked city of Sedom. Although, as we just read, there might be some nuance here. Since it makes no difference to the brothers which portion they receive, since the parcels of land must be of equal value, where it matters to this brother that the area he receives should be adjacent to the land he already bought. The court forces the others to give this brother his portion along his boundary. Okay, nice. Now we have an early rabbinic text. It's a Braita, it's a Tanaitic text, early rabbinic text, and it says, Anshe Sedom lo nitka'o ela bishvil tova sheishpia lahem hakadosh baruch hu. The people of Sedom became haughty and sinned due only to the excessive goodness that the Holy One, blessed be He, bestowed upon them. And what is written concerning them? As for the earth, out of it comes bread, and underneath it is turned up as it were by fire. Its stones are the place of sapphires, and it has dust of gold. That path no bird of prey knows, neither has the falcon's eye seen it. The proud beasts have not trodden it, nor has the lion passed thereby. So this is from Job. So the references to Sedom, which was later overturned. Okay. The people of Sedom said, well, since we live in a land from which bread comes and has the dust of gold, we have everything that we need. Why do we need travelers, as they come only to divest us of our property? Come, let us cause the proper treatment of travelers to be forgotten from our land, as it is stated also from Job. He breaks open a watercourse in a place far from inhabitants, forgotten by pedestrians. They are dried up. They have moved away from men. So this seems to be building off of, even though the quotes are from Job, but building off of Ezekiel. Not being hospitable, not willing to share, even amongst the people in their town. It also shines a different light on what we read in this week's Torah portion about they don't want to be kind to travelers or passersby. So that's interesting. Now the Talmud then goes on to share a bunch of interesting, colorful descriptions of Sedom. This is even later. I told you the text we just saw was early rabbinic. This is going to be much later. Certainly some colorful storytelling. So here we go. There were 4 judges in Sedom: Shakrai, Zaphai, and Matzledin. Okay, so the names don't mean anything to us, but Shakrai is a liar. Shakrurai is a habitual liar. We have Ziphi, which is a forger, and Matzledina, perverter of justice. So now the Talmud is calling these people out, saying one's just worse than the next. They're meant to be judges, but they have nothing to do with justice. These were the judgments that they rendered. In a case of one who strikes the wife of another and causes her to miscarry, they would say to the woman's husband, give the woman to the one who struck her so that she will be impregnated for you again. In a case of one who severed the ear of another's donkey, they would say to the owner of the donkey, give the donkey to the one who caused the damage until the ear grows back. In a case of one who wounds another, they would say to the injured party, give the one who wounded you a fee, as he let your blood. Now, this is not only woeful injustice, it's actually the opposite. It's an intensification of radical injustice. It's an inversion of justice. It's not just, they're messing with justice. They're taking what is just and doing the exact opposite. Especially the ear piece of it. That's really weird. Someone caused you pain. But they let your blood. It's fine. Now you have to pay them. Normally, you would be paid for the donkey. Instead of severing the ear of another's donkey, you give the donkey to them. No, they should owe you a donkey. And then to the one who strikes the wife of another and causes her to miscarry, instead of saying, now you would say pay damages, they should owe you. Now, actually, you're giving your wife to her or to him. You're giving your wife to him. He can impregnate her just to make it up. It's terrible. Okay. It's not just bad. It is the opposite. It's just the exact opposite of what would be characterized as just. Okay. So that is pretty disturbing and the exact opposite of what should be. Here's another one. The Sodomites, they had beds on which they would lay their guests. When a guest was longer than the bed, they would cut him. And when a guest was shorter than the bed, they would stretch him. Eliezer, servant of Abraham, happened to come there. They said to him, come lie on the bed. He said to them, I took a vow that since the day my mother died, I do not lie on my bed. Okay. So that's pretty strange. They wanted to make everything exactly equal. You have a bed? All right. We're either going to stretch you or cut you just to make you fit. That they only want things to be a certain way, and that's it. And then it continues. Let one who crosses a ferry give a dinar as a payment. Let one who does not cross on a ferry give two. Anyone who had a row of bricks, each and every one would come and take one and say to him, I'm taking one. Okay, I will take one. And then there was someone who would cast garlic or onions to dry. Each and every one would come and take one and say to them, I took only one. Okay. Finally, actually, a couple more stories. When a poor person would happen to come to Sedom, each and every person would give him a dinar, and the name of the giver was written on each dinar, and they would not give him or sell him bread. Oh, wow. So they gave him money, but they're not willing to sell him the bread. When he would die, each and every person would come back and take their money, their dinar, this coin. That's pretty terrible. And now we get some more, but I'll leave with this one. There was a young woman who would take bread out to the poor people in a pitcher. The matter was revealed, and they smeared her with honey and positioned her on the wall of the city, and the hornets came and consumed her, and that is what is written. And the Lord said, because the cry of Sedom and Amorah is great. Okay. So this is really fascinating. So Rabbi Steve Greenberg, who is a fellow Ohioan, and actually once upon a time he lived here in Cincinnati. He came from Columbus, and he now lives, I believe, up in Boston. He wrote, this is an excerpt from, I don't know where this came from, Real Sin of Sedom. He says, the story of Sedom and Amorah is surely the best known of the biblical narratives used to condemn homosexuality. For over a millennium, preachers have employed it with dramatic effect to prohibit and punish sex between men. The word sodomy, invented by an English churchman to describe male intercourse, helped to transform male sexual relations into an unparalleled evil. Despite the common perception that the sin of Sedom was rampant sexual vice, Jewish literature has largely rejected this reading. The prophet Ezekiel, which we saw earlier, locates the sin of Sedom in its inhospitality, its cruelty and perversion of justice, and not in homosexuality. He describes Sedom as arrogant and insensitive to human need. The residents of Sedom had plenty of bread and untroubled tranquility, yet they refused to support the poor and the needy. The people of Sedom are not only protective of their wealth and punishing of acts of charity, they are also desperate to force everyone to fit into a single measure. They have a well-to-do gated community that makes sure No beggars disturb their luxury and peace. They have zoned out poverty. But what makes Sedom the right kind of neighborhood is that no difference is tolerated. Our kind of folk are welcomed and protected while all the rest are excluded or eliminated. It can hardly be incidental that the locus of this one-size-fits-all violence is a bed that serves as a guillotine and a rack. The place of sleep, comfort, and sexual pleasure in Sedom has been transformed into a place of threat and malice, a device of torture for strangers. Eliezer saves himself from being amputated or stretched by the mourning of his mother. That was one of the texts that we saw. The people of Sedom treat all who are not inside the walls as being as good as dead. Eliezer treats the dead with an honor and presence that makes their memory a living reality. Sedom is a place where compassion is punished brutally, as the story of the young maiden suggests. Eliezer is saved from Sedom's evil, not by his sword, not by his cunning, but by his own loving beyond all boundaries or benefit, by loving which, like a mother's love, has no reasons. What brought down the wrath of God upon Sedom was not homosexuality, but inhospitality and cruelty, arrogance and greed, callousness, fear of loss, and ultimately violence against the stranger. Indeed, we cannot let our communities become like Sedom, a city where humiliation and even violence against people who are different is judged to be the epitome of moral decency and religious integrity. I think what Rabbi Greenberg does there nicely weaves together what we have read, not only in what we read in this week's Torah portion in the book of Genesis, also what we read in the book of Ezekiel, as well as those various rabbinic stories in the Babylonian Talmud describing the inhospitability of the residents of Sedom, and how it is certainly a measure, a characteristic that we do not want to emulate. We got a glimpse of that in Pirkei Avot. Not really clear. It's meant to be as a way of perceiving. If we wanted to go back to that, we would say, okay, what's mine is mine, yours is a typical, right? That is the immediate response. This is the common. This is a typical approach. However, there is this sort of side perspective. Some who would say, yeah, but that's Midat Sedom. That is a characteristic of the folks of Sedom, which is not good, is not valorized. So hopefully this is an interesting, when we think of the Anshe Sedom, the people of Sedom, the Sodomites, what were they like? What was certainly deserving of death, right? Them, Amorah, 3 other towns got wiped out by God because they were devoid of good people. So hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully that was insightful, and certainly an interesting thing I don't think we typically consider. Yeah. All right, Debbie, any thoughts?
Until the rabbi that it was from here gave his commentary, I kept thinking in my mind, what relevance does this have in today's world? But when he wrote, it has brought it and made it a real realization. And I appreciated that very much. And I agree with it very much. I think it can come down to the community that we live in here and the way we treat people here.
Yeah.
And very often we have folks who don't treat people the way God would choose us to. And they are not mentally off. That just happens to be their character. And to me, that's a sad situation.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it today very much.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your effort.
Certainly. And I agree with you. The Rabbi Greenberg excerpt certainly does a nice way of not only tying all those texts together, but also bring it to present day of the way that we think and treat and relate to other people.
Right.
Yeah.
And to me, that is extremely important in the small community that we live in, to keep that in mind. Because you run into folks who are maybe not quite as sharp as they have been in the past. They are older and crotchetier and hurt more than they would have 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And we have to keep that in mind. And interacting with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really do believe that strongly. I enjoyed it today. Thank you very much for sharing it.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing your insights and the way that it connects with our very specific reality here.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you benefited. I hope you got insights. But before we go, we just want to thank and acknowledge that all Jewish life and programming here at Majestic Care of Cedar Village are due to the financial beneficence of Jewish Home of Cincinnati. Thank you so much. And with that, I want to say thank you and Shabbat Shalom.